I'd like to welcome you this morning to this first in a weekly series of Meditations for Everyone. It's the title that was sort of given to this series. My name is Dennis Hunter, and I have been practicing and studying and teaching in the Buddhist, particularly the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of meditation for about 17 years. I've written a couple of books on meditation and mindful living and Buddhist philosophy. One of them is here behind me. It's called The Four Reminders. That's my most recent book. And what I would like to do today in particular is just begin with a meditation practice that is very fundamental to the whole endeavor of meditation. It's called mindfulness, and I'm sure you've probably heard that term before. It's a word that is very much in vogue in society these days, and you see it on the cover of magazines, you see it being practiced in corporations, in yoga studios, in all kinds of places. But the practice of mindfulness itself is really drawn in its essence, in its roots, and in its techniques from the Buddhist tradition. So it has very ancient roots. And in some ways, in contemporary society, it's been very much secularized. And that's great, because that makes it more appealing and accessible to people who don't necessarily relate to things from a Buddhist perspective. That just happens to be my perspective, because I trained in that tradition. But this practice doesn't require you to hold any particular beliefs or practice any isms or religion. It's just a basic practice of really being in touch with the present moment, and a technique of training the mind to stay present, to stay here, to stay now, and just keep coming back. And I'll say more about that as we get into the practice. I'd like to share a quote from one of the contemporary kind of forefathers of the contemporary secular mindfulness movement, named Jon Kabat-Zinn, from his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. Jon Kabat-Zinn, in the 70s and 80s, sort of took a lot of the techniques and the wisdom of Buddhist mindfulness practice and applied it particularly at that time in a clinical setting to help people deal with pain and chronic illness and stress reduction and that sort of thing. And he pioneered this technique called mindfulness-based stress reduction, that MBSR for short, that you may have heard of. So he talks about things in a way that's really broadly accessible and applicable to anyone, and I really like the way he describes it here. He says, mindfulness is an ancient Buddhist practice which has profound relevance for our present-day lives. This relevance has nothing to do with Buddhism per se, or with becoming a Buddhist, but it has everything to do with waking up and living in harmony with oneself and the world. It has to do with examining who we are, with questioning our view of the world and our place in it, and with cultivating some appreciation for the fullness of each moment we are alive. Most of all, it has to do with being in touch. And I really like that definition of mindfulness, that most of all it has to do with being in touch with oneself, in touch with what's going on within you at this moment, but also just in touch with your world, in touch with what's happening in this present moment in your world, in your life, and right in front of you. So I'll share another quote from that and perhaps another book as we get a little bit further into the practice, but why don't we begin by jumping right into the technique itself. So find a comfortable way to sit, and for everybody that's a little bit different. It might be sitting the way I am on the floor with a couple of cushions to lift my hips. But basically you want to be upright and not necessarily just kind of slouching or lounging on, laying on your back. I mean, that's fine if you need to lay down. It's also totally fine to sit in a chair if for any reason, this kind of thing on your knees is not easy. Just find whatever position is comfortable for you so that you can find that sort of upright, balanced presence in your body. So that's the first step. And I like to think of this technique in what I call the ABCs of mindfulness, the sort of the building blocks. And if you remember these ABCs, then it's really easy to put yourself into the practice whenever you come to it. So, like the A is body. This is what we're doing right now. It's just finding the right position for the body, making the body comfortable so that we can move into stillness. And there are a lot of subtleties to that, to the position of the body that are taught in the tradition that we don't really need to get into here. We don't have time to get into here. Basically, it's just about finding what's most comfortable for you, letting the body be relaxed, rolling the shoulders back and down so they're not hunched forward or backward. Maybe let your arms hang loose at the side, and then just lift your forearms and just let your hands drift down to your thighs. You can also place your hands in your lap if that's more comfortable. If you like to close your eyes, that's totally fine. Some people prefer to meditate with eyes open. That's the way I was trained. Other people prefer to meditate with their eyes closed. If you do keep your eyes open, perhaps train your gaze a little bit down, maybe 3 to 4 feet in front of you on the floor, and just let your gaze be soft. So you're not, normally something we do is we kind of look at things very intensely, like we have laser vision, and we're gonna bore a hole through whatever we're looking at. So don't do that. Just let your gaze be soft and relaxed. Or just close your eyes. So that's A, the body. Just finding a place where for the next little while you can commit to being still. Just make that commitment to yourself. There's nobody watching, there's no meditation police, but just make a commitment to yourself that to the best of your ability for the next little while that we're together in this practice, you'll commit to stillness within the body. And of course, if you need to move, if something hurts, move by all means. But notice those little times when, maybe something itches and the immediate impulse is to scratch the itch. And give yourself a pause. So maybe notice the itch, give it 3 breaths before you actually move to scratch the itch. Just give it a moment to see if it's really necessary. And sometimes you'll find that the itch, the impulse, the urge to move, the restlessness kind of goes away if you take that pause. And then just begin to tune your awareness to your breath, to the natural process of your breath as it's already happening right now in this moment. Not trying to breathe in any particular way, but just noticing the physical sensations of the breath as they're happening in the body right now. So you may notice the movement of the abdomen and the chest as you breathe in and out. The rib cage kind of expands and contracts. The abdomen, lower abdomen moves a little bit as the diaphragm pushes down. So you might notice the movement and the sensation of the breath there within the torso and the abdomen. You might also notice the movement of the breath at the tip of your nose as you're breathing in and out through your nose. You might feel that slight tickle of air coming in, going out. And as you begin to deepen your attention and really bring some precision to it, at the tip of your nose, as the air comes in and goes out, you might notice that as it comes in, it's slightly cooler, and then as the air leaves the body, it's slightly warmer. So there's a temperature difference that you might be able to tune into. Just really begin to notice these physical sensations of the breath, these details, and allow your awareness to just softly rest there. And this is what I would call the second building block of the practice, part B. The first was body. The second is placing the attention on the object of meditation, which in this case is the breath. And the third building block, the third part of establishing the practice or working with the practice in an ongoing way is mind. Because even in this very short amount of time that we've started to place our attention on the breath, you may have already noticed that the mind wanders. A thought of perception of something from the outside world comes in and distracts the attention, or a thought of the past, of something that happened last night or this morning comes in, or a thought of something from 20 years ago, whatever it might be, or some kind of anticipation of the future, some kind of thought about things that haven't happened yet. These are the two most common places that the mind tends to go, either into the past or into the future. And it often brings a lot of emotional coloration with it when we drift into the past. Maybe we start to feel some kind of emotional content that's related to things that happened in the past. So maybe there's a guilt or a regret or a pride attached to something that we're thinking about that happened in the past. So it becomes a whole rabbit hole that we go down when we start to follow that thought. And similarly with the future, when we start to let our attention drift into thoughts about the future, anticipating, then we start to perhaps get into hoping and fearing, scheming, anticipating things that may or may not happen, worrying, and so forth. So a lot of the practice of mindfulness is really about recognizing whenever our attention has been pulled in either of these directions and we're no longer really here, but we're kind of drifting somewhere. And then when we recognize that, we don't beat ourselves up for it. We don't try to shoot down our thoughts like aggressively. We just kind of notice, okay, I was gone there. I was off in a thought. And then we just kind of unhook ourselves from it, come back to the present moment, and bring our attention back to the breath, which is already happening right here, right now. And so we come back, as Jon Kabat-Zinn would say, we come back to being in touch with what's here, what's now, which is just that this body, this human body, is sitting here, breathing. It's very simple, not necessarily easy, because our mental conditioning is so strong to wander into the past or into the future, or to start commenting on what's happening in the present moment, analyzing it, questioning, am I doing this the right way? What is it talking about? Da, 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 da. I mean, the mind has so many countless ways of moving out of just being in touch with the present moment, with what's here and now. And the training, the practice, is really all about recognizing anytime we get caught in one of those ways of not being here, gently, in a way that's friendly towards ourselves, letting go of that distraction and coming back, coming back, coming back. Doesn't matter how many times we have to come back in a session, how many times we get distracted, we just keep coming back, and that is the essence of the training, just coming back. And over time, as we work with this practice, we begin to, it's like training a muscle, we begin to cultivate a greater capacity for staying present, for attention, for recognizing when a thought is starting to pull our attention away, and maybe unhooking ourselves from it a little bit earlier in the process and staying more present. So now that you know the A, B, C, the basic building blocks of the practice, let's just sit in silence doing the practice for a few minutes. I'll ring the bell at the start and the end of this little segment of practice. So again, take the most comfortable position you can find with your body so that you're relaxed and upright. Find that comfortable way to relax your gaze, whether it's placing your gaze down on the floor or closing your eyes. Bring your attention as fully as possible to the breath, to noticing in an unfabricated way, in a way that requires no commentary and adding nothing to it. Just noticing the sensations of the breath as they're happening in the present moment. And then whenever the attention drifts, come back. Again, if you find that your attention has wandered to a thought or some kind of discursive commentary, or if you're just joining us in the middle of the session, just bring your attention back to the breath. Find that stillness within the body, and then by resting your attention on the physical sensations of the breath, begin to find a stillness within the mind. It's a stillness that follows the movements of the breath, but it doesn't add anything to that. It just notices, just watches. One of my teachers, Pema Chodron, says that this process, this learning process of meditation, particularly from a mindfulness point of view, is like training a puppy. And a puppy's natural inclination is to run after whatever thing in the environment draws its attention. And that's what our minds tend to do a lot of the time. So here in this mindfulness practice, we are encouraging the puppy that represents our minds to stay, stay, stay. And not in a way that's like bad dog if the attention wanders. We don't beat ourselves up when we become distracted in meditation, but just notice and gently unhook from it and bring our awareness back to the breath, back to the present moment. My teacher Pema Chodron also says this: when we sit down to meditate, we can connect with something unconditional, a state of mind, a basic environment that does not grasp or reject anything. Meditation is probably the only activity that doesn't add anything to the picture. Everything is allowed to come and go without further embellishment. Meditation is a totally non-violent, non-aggressive occupation. Not filling the space, allowing for the possibility of connecting with unconditional openness. This provides the basis for real change. So a state of mind, a basic environment that we create for ourselves in the practice where we don't grasp at or reject anything. We don't label this thought that comes along as good or bad, and therefore if it's good I'll follow it, if it's bad I'll push it away. In the context of this practice, all thoughts are regarded equally. They're just thoughts. There's no need to get so bothered by them. We can just notice them coming, notice them going, and not get so hooked into them, so identified with them. It's like watching the clouds pass through the sky and understanding that our basic nature is not the cloud that we're seeing, but it's the sky through which the clouds move. It's this open, unconditional space of awareness. And if during the course of this practice you find that it just feels impossible because your mind is so full of thoughts, and every time you try to place your attention on the breath, within a few seconds something has drawn your attention away, then I would probably say, congratulations, you're a human being. Because that is pretty much the universal human experience. When we first begin to work with this kind of practice, what we encounter first is the wildness, the untamed quality of our own minds. And we see vividly, and sometimes perhaps for the first time, how easily distracted our attention is, how much we wander all the time, how much we're lost in thoughts about the past and the future, and how little time we actually spend just being in touch with this moment, what's happening right now. If that sounds like your experience, don't be discouraged, because there is a process that happens over the course of working with this practice in an ongoing way, even if it's in very small amounts, like 5 or 10 minutes a day, of just sitting, resting your attention on a simple object like the breath. Over time, that begins to build a capacity, a familiarity, a habit that is entrained within your brain, within your body, within your nervous system, and within your mind. And gradually change starts to happen. to share another quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who I mentioned earlier. Mindfulness provides a simple but powerful route for getting ourselves unstuck, back into touch with our own wisdom and vitality. It is a way to take charge of the direction and quality of our own lives, including our relationships within the family, our relationship to work, and to the larger world and planet, and most fundamentally, our relationship with ourselves as a person. The key to this path, which lies at the root of Buddhism, Taoism, and yoga, and which we also find in the works of people like Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman, and in Native American wisdom, is an appreciation for the present moment and the cultivation of an intimate relationship with it through a continual attending to it with care and discernment. It is the direct opposite of taking life for granted. So I really resonate very much with several things that he says there. That mindfulness, this practice that we're engaged in at this very moment, involves an appreciation for the present moment and the cultivation of an intimate relationship with it through this continual attending to it, which is the process I described before. Whenever you notice that you're not attending to it, just bring yourself back and attend to the present moment, to the breath that's happening right now, to the sensations that you might notice within the body, and attend to it with care and discernment, without judgment, without an agenda, without storylines or expectations of having some kind of transformative experience, just attending to this present moment, to this breath, to this here and now, with care and discernment and curiosity and openness, which is the opposite of taking this moment of our lives for granted. It's really paying attention to this moment with great care. take a moment, if you like, to stretch your legs, to move, to scratch that itch that maybe you've been ignoring during the course of the practice. Just relax and allow yourself to come out of the practice a little bit slowly, a little bit gently. But to share one more quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn. So he's speaking in regards to the way that mindfulness practice relates to our lives in general and stands in opposition to the way we normally approach our lives, which is in this kind of fog. So he says the habit of ignoring our present moments in favor of others, like drifting into the past or into the future thoughts, in favor of others yet to come, leads directly to a pervasive lack of awareness of the web of life in which we are embedded. This includes a lack of awareness and understanding of our own mind and how it influences our perceptions and our actions. It severely limits our perspective on what it means to be a person and how we are connected to each other and to the world around us. Religion has traditionally been the domain of such fundamental inquiries within a spiritual framework, but mindfulness has little to do with religion, except in the most fundamental meaning of the word, as an attempt to appreciate the deep mystery of being alive, and to acknowledge being vitally connected to all that exists. So for me, that's one of the most profound aspects of this practice of mindfulness, which I really would encourage you to, if you haven't established a mindfulness practice, give it a try. Just take out 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, whatever you can manage, and just sit with your breath, work with this practice the way that we've done today, and see what starts to happen as you cultivate the habit of at least attempting to be in the present moment. And what I find begins to happen over time is that you really begin to cultivate that deep appreciation for the mystery of being alive. It's not necessarily providing answers about the mystery, it's just really being in it and appreciating it in a way that's fuller and richer and more present. And also that vital connection between oneself and all that exists in the world around us. So I'd really like to thank you once again for joining this session today and meditating with me. For those of you who joined late, my name is Dennis Hunter, and you can find out more about me on my website, dennishuntermeditation.com, and you can check out my book, The 4 Reminders, which is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and I hope to see you next week. Namaste.